I got to see my PowerPoint. So
Gotcha. Well, you have both screens set up, right?
I have one very important priority in my life, and you can kind of see them down here at the bottom. This is my lovely family, my wife Brenda, my dear wife. There's me, our 3 kids, our wonderful spouses, and 7 grandkids. So that's our number one priority, my number one priority. But number 2, or right close to it, is lean management. I'm very passionate about it, and I want to just give you just a little bit idea of where I'm coming from. So I was originally trained in many years ago in management science and industrial engineering. So I started out kind of, with the quality perspective. And then for the last 10 years, I've been heavily involved in lean management and in teaching at an MBA program, supervising lean projects, and doing a lot of business coaching. So I bring the kind of the quality hat, but most of my career actually was in corporate America as a manager, then as an executive, and also I was owner and president of my own company along with my wife Brenda. So I bring the business kind of manager, executive hat here as well, so I can sort of look at it from both perspectives. And that's what will bring to you tonight is this idea of a simplified lean for frontline service management. So I'm going to try to highlight some of the things that I have been doing along those lines that hopefully you'll find interesting and useful in the things that you're doing, whether you are a practitioner out, in a business, or if you're a consultant, educator, and so forth. So tonight is basically about this model, this way of understanding and teaching lean that really I've developed over pretty much the last 10 years in just having to deal with mostly companies that are in what I call frontline service. And so here I'm just trying to explain what that is. Basically, these are the people in the companies that are out there doing the work, dealing with customers or dealing with each other. Kind of excludes the top and middle level management of larger companies. So it certainly includes small business. I mean, everybody in a small business is frontline for the most part, unless you get up into the, depends what you mean by small, but then also autonomous business units in larger companies that are on the front line. So for example, we did work with some of the large banks, large pharmacy operations, but dealing at store level, that type of thing. So that's what we're talking about. And by service, I'm picking up non-manufacturing work. So that's just been my primary audience. So I've really tried to specialize more in that, the non-manufacturing, which sometimes we call transactional processes, which would pick up service kind of processes, but also administrative. So even if you're in a manufacturing company, obviously you have administrative practices too, so administrative processes. And that would fall under the category of what I'm trying to address. The things that I have had that I've tried to develop as I've taught and consulted on lean in this model that I'm going to present. Number one, in any of these kind of activities, which are transactional, service, and administrative, there's a heightened role of the personal workers on the front line. They're the ones who are actually doing the work. They're interacting with customers. They're interacting with each other. So that translates into really emphasizing what I call full engagement of the worker. So this is the way I teach the lean, is not to be, this is what you're going to have a department that comes in and does Kaizen events, and all that's fine, but that's not what this model is about. This model is about trying to help the frontline service workers and management make lean a part of what they do every day, make it a part of their work life, really. I've also found the need to reflect kind of this network pattern, which I found that the processes, and this is a more technical issue, but I'll point it out as I go through, that they tend to be more network oriented as opposed to a chain. Like you see a supply chain, you see manufacturing is pretty linear, and we map it that way. But I found a different way of mapping these service administrative processes that some of you may use, but I thought you'd be interested in. And lastly, addressing management obstacles. And it's a huge area. And I know, many of us who try to teach and promote lean struggle with getting management, executives, and owners to really buy into lean. They tend to really like the tools part and what's the task part of lean, but the people side and the respect for people side is a lot of times a harder sell, and I'll go into that. So I've got a slide here just to talk about this, and Manny, I think this would be maybe one of the points where you and I could kind of exchange on this. Let me just kind of go through quickly what these points are, and then we can talk about, how this, are these really problems, and how can these be addressed? So I've got 5 problems set up here. I'll just go through them quick, and then Manny, we can maybe chat about it. Confusion over the nature of lean. Every time I say lean to somebody who doesn't know about it, they seem to automatically say, "Oh, you mean that Six Sigma stuff?" So that's one issue, is having, understanding really what is lean, especially when it comes to the respect for people side. Overestimating complexity and cost. Again, if for people that kind of confuse or conflate lean and Lean Six Sigma, they say, "Oh, well, that's all that statistical stuff, and gee, it costs a lot to train on the belts and all that, and I can't afford that," or I'm not that comfortable with all that statistics. Resistance to transformational change, and this is where a lot of times, we in the lean trying to train on lean, and we promote it as a transformation, right? We say you've got to really change the way you work with your employees, and that is true a lot of times. But this is with my executive manager hat on. If I look at that, as an ongoing executive, I've got my way of doing things. It's working pretty well for me. Are you telling me everything I'm doing is wrong? I got to throw it all out. So in order to address that, I've really tried to take a more incremental approach to this, that you don't have to do this gigantic transformation, and we'll get into how that's done. So the first 3 I kind of can address with the model. The last 2 I also try to, but they're tough ones: short-term thinking and ROI focus. Clearly public companies are very short-term oriented, even a lot of the larger private companies. Then lastly, classical management traditions and biases of, it's just the way we do things. It's kind of this traditional command and control approach, which really doesn't lend itself well to kind of the respect for people idea that comes along with the full lean. So, Manny, what are your thoughts on that? Am I missing things here? Does this make sense?
No, I think you've got exactly some of the challenges to it. I also think, and you kind of address it with the short-term thinking, but I really feel like, management and we practitioners are really looking for what's the one thing that we can change that'll get us to our goal. And the short answer is we all know, and we will all say, hey, look, lots of small changes can make a huge difference when they're allowed to impact, a situation. But we still look for the home run. We're still looking for that one thing, and that's where, like, sometimes I think people just they don't give lean as much time and attention as it deserves, or as it needs to really be good. So I could go on about that, but I think you're covering all this. So
yeah, that's a great point, and that relates to the short-term thinking. Like you say, you want the home run. What gives me such confidence that I can say, these little changes all the time. And Paul Akers, who's fantastic, who actually was one of our suppliers, we grew our businesses together. He's about making a 2-second improvement every day, 2-second improvement. But from having done it in my own business for 10 years, and it turned out incredibly successful for us. The little stuff all the time is just absolutely better than trying to do, I mean, you still will do the big things now and then, but it's the little stuff. It's kind of the blocking and tackling and getting better and better and better that truly, truly is a better way of running a business. Okay, so here's the model. Now, and again, this is basically how I teach it. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it. It's just I'm trying to show you the things that I do that I've tried to address my challenges. And of course, I use the two, which we, in the industry consider the two pillars of lean: continuous improvement, getting a little better all the time, and respect for people as the other pillar. But when I communicate this, and remember, I've been mainly teaching MBA students and working with managers and owners of businesses. I really not dealing with, technical folks. And so I present it as 4 management practices. So all 4 of these that you see here, these columns, are the 4 practices that I believe encompass all the important stuff of lean. But the way I teach it is that you can, these are the 4, and I show how they work together, but any one of them can make an improvement in your business. So, and depending on the needs, you may have more of an interest in motivation and, morale and so forth. You're more in building culture of trust. Maybe you have issues with, lack of standard work and so forth. I won't get into the details, but the point is that each one is presented as a management practice. And you could very easily, as you're teaching this, point out, look, I'm sure you already do, you already have standards at work, but let's show you what lean standardizing work looks like. At the bottom here, these are the traditional, and there's 6 traditional lean techniques that I teach as part of this package. And so, but frankly, these are optional. I mean, as long as you understand the way of the lean way of standardizing work, the lean way of making the work more transparent, you don't have to use these, but I mean, they're great. They're, what they do is they help, they show you how to do it. This is how to do it better than, say, you're doing it now. So I'm going to go through each of the 4 of these, and then try to show you some of the different ways that I'm applying some of these techniques that, maybe give you something useful that you could use. So let me start with the first practice, the first management practice: continuously improving work. Of course, the traditional lean technique here would be problem solving, right? A3 problem solving. We do Kaizen events and so forth. So the 2 things I'm going to talk about are how I've been doing it. One is service process mapping, where I address kind of the unique nature of what these processes look like, service and administrative processes. And then 4 ways training, which has been very successful as a way of really, again, engaging the employees in the lean activity and making it really a lifestyle for them at work. So for service process mapping, this is the traditional value stream map, very much of a chain, right? I mean, it applies to manufacturing, supply chains. You have materials moving in one direction generally, you have information moving in the other. It's kind of a circular map, but you're, I'm sure, all familiar with this if you're in the industry. But it turns out in trying to use this pattern in teaching mapping to managers who are working in service industries, it really didn't work well. And I really came across this, what's called PCM diagram, and I'm not going to go into the details, but I did want to mention it. Having researched and taught service operations management, there's really a fair amount of theoretical research behind this, that in fact, service processes are not chains, they're more networks. And you also see there's columns here that relate to who's doing the work, which many of you would recognize as swim lanes. So basically, instead of using that traditional value stream map, I replace it with 2 documents: a process flow chart and a Gantt chart. Okay, I won't go into the details, we don't have the time, but I found this is way more effective in helping people learning this to actually do the mapping. Here you're seeing, of course, the connections logically between different steps and so forth. And here you do see the time sequence in more like a chain. So you really kind of get both factors. I do have templates for these that are very easy to use, so I'm always happy to share those with you. So the other way of applying lean that I don't know if I've seen this before, is to provide a 4 waste alternative. So of course, we always have the 7 waste, sometimes even the 8 waste. And of course, Tim Wood has been a very popular way of an acronym of remembering the 7 wastes, right? And what I found is, in order to get people to really internalize this and use it in their day-to-day work, this is frankly too many. You can simplify it. You can still break it out. So for example, defects are defects, waiting is waiting, but what I call effort picks up transport, the T, it picks up motion, human motion, it picks up over processing. So all those are excessive effort. Materials picks up overproduction and inventory. So let's dig into that a little bit, and I'll just show you how I present that. So, of course, with the premise that waste is any activity or process that doesn't produce value for the customer. And here, of course, as many of you presented, you can talk about an external customer who is the one who pays the bills and buys things, or an internal customer with a lot of administrative processes, like an employee would be an internal customer of a payroll process. And so using this, rather than having an acronym, try to develop it as just a logical thing that you can remember, that you have to look at the activity, figure out who is the customer of it, whether external or internal, what do they want, what do they need, and if we're not delivering that, that's a defect. Okay, so pretty simple, straightforward. What does that customer of what I'm doing want? And if I'm not delivering it, I'm making an error, mistake, some kind of problem. That's a defect. Everything else has to do with the way in which we deliver that product or service. So I might be delivering exactly what the customer wants, but it's taking too long. Well, that's waiting. I might be delivering exactly what they want, but I'm exhibiting, it's too much effort. There's too much processing, steps, moving, transportation. I could do it with less. I can deliver what they want, but I'm acquiring, holding, or using more material. So anyway, I won't, again, all these, take more time to explain, but I want to just show and give you some idea of why I'm doing this. And then Manny, this would be a good place to jump into. I also define what I call waste signals. So again, this trying to train not just the supervisors, but the workers. This is meant to really engage the workers directly in doing this. What signals can they look for? Customer upset with delays, people walking around a lot. So this chart, which is one of the handouts, is actually something that could be put on the wall, used for training, that again engages the frontline workers in doing this. Basic 3 steps: find some waste, try to eliminate it, and then if you've eliminated it, accept that change or try something else. The beauty of this is that by simplifying this, individuals can apply this to their own individual work. So you don't have to worry about collaborating and having Kaizen events. You can apply it to the most basic personal work you do. So you can, again, that incremental idea, you can learn it, a manager can learn it, a worker can learn it just within their own work, and then you move into more, multi-person processes in the business process. So Manny, another great place for you to jump in, see if I'm nuts here or what.
No, you're not nuts. I mean, I'm sure that anyone could think of things to add on. But what I really like, David, is that, especially for people who have trouble spelling the word lean, right? Because they're just not that familiar with it. I think this is great. You got 4 wastes, you got 3 steps. I mean, honestly, in just a couple of moments, I think people could understand what's going on. At first, I was like, well, I'm a Tim P. Wood guy. Where's overprocessing? Where's overproduction?
Right. Yeah, that's why I did the table for it.
And honestly, I mean, is there overproduction? Could it happen? It could happen. You gave an example, I think, but in a service environment, that's not necessarily the big deal. I mean, if you want to talk about too much inventory on a truck, that would be inventory, though. That's not overproduction. So I think you've nailed the essence of it. And if you're looking for a simple model, I think this is good. You can always complicate things, but stripping it down to the essentials is pretty good.
All right.
You have a question that I think would be incredibly appropriate here.
Okay.
A couple of them, actually. So one of them is that many companies claim they want the entire lean transformation and all the benefits. So what questions would you ask a leader to make sure they're really ready for this?
Well, I think the two, the big one there is, are they ready for respect for people and full engagement? And I do have a tool that can be used, and I do use for assessing readiness. We'll be covering that shortly. As far as what is the current culture and level of trust and level of respect within the company. That's probably the big one. I mean, if other than that, I think the other big thing, of course, is that you're not in the middle of a huge conversion, a huge upheaval where, we're in a because obviously lean is a longer term activity. If they're 3 months from going out of business and they're in a very urgent situation, I think that would be another kind of, hey, maybe you ought to wait. But as long as they're ready to buy into respect for people, I'm okay. I don't know, Manny, what's your thought on that?
It's funny because the respect for people is the big thing. And, a guy like Paul Akers, you mentioned him with 2-second lean. I mean, having talked to him quite a bit, I know he's focused on this every day. He spends probably more time focused internally than externally, because he's well aware that culture is just something that it's hard to ignite. It's easy to put out. And if you're not real careful with it, if he's having a bad day, he told me, he's like, I can't talk to some of my people sometimes because they take it the wrong way.
Right.
So just recognizing the effect that you have on people, I think it comes back to emotional intelligence and the idea that, you patience with results. I mean, I think it's huge. And I think you're saying all these things, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do have another question.
Yep.
And so where with your model would the hidden factory fall in? Would it be under defects or overproduction or maybe somewhere else?
I'm sorry, the what?
The hidden factory, as they call it. In the manufacturing world, we call like all the rework, retest, all those resources as a hidden factory, because we don't think about it, but the resources being used to make sure the product eventually gets produced properly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, well, if there's
defects or overproduction.
Yeah, if there's rework due to a problem, then that would be a defect. Okay, so that's one of the common waste signals. If I say the steak overcooked at a restaurant is a great example of that. You had to recook it. So, but if you're talking more about QC and those types of things, then I would put that under effort. So why, in other words, you can say, well, we really think we need the QC activities, and you may, but you have to ask yourself, is it more effort than you really need? Is there a way to achieve your meeting the needs of the customer without defects, with less effort? Can you get to a point where you can reduce the QC? Is that what when you say the hidden factory, the QC idea?
Well, it's the resources necessary to test, to rework or repair, and it can be a significant amount of stuff that we don't see. Whereas if you could somehow eliminate the rework and repair, you could then dedicate those resources to.
Okay, I see what you're saying, and see that's where I really. Frankly, if you're in manufacturing, and that's why I qualify this is for non-manufacturing processes, because to me, that's unique to manufacturing, and I don't see an equivalent to that in the service world. At least it hasn't come up in, again, all of what I do here is really kind of built out of the crucible of teaching it really hundreds of times, hundreds of projects, and that the idea you're talking about seems like it's more of a manufacturing concept, like design, like the whole area of product design and all that. Does that make
sure.
sense? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would think with the hidden factory too, some of it could be considered effort. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't just make it, we got to fix it and then make sure it's right and then send it out again. So one of those
Right.
things, when you see one waste, you'll usually see more than one too.
Yeah, yeah. And I, I always say too, it's not really critical that you classify the waste in one category or the other, as long as you've identified it as waste and you address it. But I think it is important to ask those kind of questions. Okay. All right. Should I move on? Anything else on waste? Anybody else?
So, okay, actually, we got another comment from someone else,
Okay.
and they
great.
said instead of calling it the hidden factory, in this case, they call it the hidden office.
Okay.
And this could be the people, I'm guessing, the people who might check things or approve things, or
Right.
it's kind of all the hoops you have to jump through to, do something simple like issue a proposal or a sales order or an invoice.
Yeah, and
If we
that's
trusted people to do the right thing.
yeah, that's very clearly right here an effort, and that seems like too much effort, too many steps required, excessive approval steps needed to issue a building permit, the whole kind of bureaucracy, unnecessary bureaucracy, why so much? So I think that's where I would see that fitting into this model.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, sure, thank you. Okay, so that was all that first practice of continuously improving work. Second practice, making work transparent. Now here, in kind of a more colloquial idea, I say it's kind of like getting and staying organized, but it's really the two lean techniques are 5S organizing, obviously a way of organizing a workplace, and visual controls I included there as well. And of course, making work transparent by itself would be very valuable. So this is something that could be done individually, already improve. If you have labeling, improve it, come up with some other visual controls that make the work easier and so forth. But if you do this together with continuous improvement, the first practice, now the work you do here to make work more transparent makes waste more visible. And so you'll do a better job at finding and eliminating waste. So that's just an example of how these are independent. You can do them independently, but they actually do connect into a system. And the question earlier about if somebody wants the whole transformation, that's awesome. And it's all four of these together. And I actually, at the end, I'll show you, I did teach an exec ed course that taught it that way, that says, here's the whole system. So for the second practice, the main thing I wanted to point out was for visual controls, again, with the idea of getting the workers engaged and actually using the controls, okay? So I have found that a good way to teach this is to recognize 5 different applications. So you're basically telling the workers, look, there's some finders. This helps you to find things, whether they're physical, digital resources. There are controls that show you how to do things. Action cues, real-time displays, and performance trackers. Let me just show you those briefly. I don't want to take too much time on it. But so for example, finders. So this is a category of visual control. And in the physical world, you have your space markings, you have your shadow boxes, floor markings, so you know where to find things. You have labels, you have examples, samples and so forth, color labels. But what I've tried to do is extend all of these to the virtual environment. Now of course, with the pandemic, there's so much going on online. So you have the equivalent of finders in the virtual workspace. Naming conventions, the way your files are named, that can make a big difference in finding the file you're looking for. Keywords, hashtags, menus and submenus. Okay, so that's just an example. There's actually our good friend Paul Akers pointing out how he does visual controls in their office kitchen. So how-tos, again, by showing the application, it helps the workers to better understand how they should use these. So how-tos, how to do things. In the physical world, you have instructions, little charts, you have physical flow guides, social distancing, all that good stuff. In the virtual world, online, you have toolbars, help tabs. And this, even just realizing that these are visual controls, and you need to be taking advantage of them. And I'm the biggest offender of not knowing some important features of the software I'm using, of Excel, of Word, of maybe other applications, to learn them, and because it helps you. You can then reduce waste, do things more quickly, and less defects if you learn those. How-to articles. You can Google just about anything these days. I don't know why you even need tech support. Oops, you do. Action cues. So this is a type of control that's looking for action. So for example, here's where I was getting my vaccination, and they had a great setup here in the hospital. You don't see them, but there are many other stations around. As soon as the station was open, she puts up her sign and it says, it's time for you, I'm open, come on over. So it's trigger action. Flags, a little bit of a mini Kanban system here of, when you're reorder point, all right, when you're almost out of toners, time to make an order. Again, virtual world, calendar reminders, email flags, timer clocks. These are all things that cue you that it's time to do something, trigger an action. Real-time display show you where things are at right now, whether it's by individuals, by process, by asset. You do have some online equivalents of all of those, of course. And then lastly, more performance trackers of historical tracking. Prior hourly performance, could be just that day, it could be going back over prior months, prior years. So with all of these, again, these are all to help. If you do this by themselves, it's only going to help to make the work better. But if you do it together with, for example, trying to engage your employees, and if you're asking them to come up with improvements and find ways to come up with improvements, you have to give them the information, give them feedback. So this works together with that part of it. The third practice then, standardize the work. Again, something, I've had companies that this is their main issue. Wow, we keep doing things, we don't really have a good standard way of doing things. So here's how you do it. You have the standard work that we're all familiar with, and then you have stand-up meetings is where the other lean technique that I consider, even though you can do many things in it, it's very much about standardizing work, because that's where you talk about, what did we do yesterday? Where do we deviate? Where do we have problems and again, as I'm sure, that standard work is not just a lockdown procedures manual. It's meant to be a living document and a basis for further change. So, so as far as the one thing I've done, I've sort of borrowed the job breakdown sheet concept from TWI, Training Within Industry, and applied it as a way of documenting standard work. So here's an example that I've used. So this is taking the process breakdown where, for this, say, support ticket handling in an MSP operation, you got the steps, and I always say, no more than 15 steps. And the reason is, I view this type of standard work as something that's not just for the people doing the work, but it is also to support collaboration and communicate to other people that don't do the work, but it helps for them to understand what your work is about. So it only helps for that engagement and teamwork. So you have the steps, process actors, who's doing what, and then of course the key points, what can make or break it, making the work easier and injuring the worker. So I found that to be a useful way of actually documenting and posting the standard work document. The fourth practice is to build a culture of trust. Again, often the most difficult of these, but of course, in many ways, the most critical if you really want this to work. The lean technique that I describe as supporting this primarily is the Gemba walk. And if it's done in the right way, it is a super way of building that trust over time. And we'll talk about that briefly. But I also feel it's important to support this practice to have if you're trying to basically promote this to show data on trusted engagement, which I've got a little bit here. And then here's that tool I mentioned, which I found to be very useful about being able to assess your level of trust. And I'll show you how that's used. So in terms of trying to explain to management, what is this building a culture of trust and why is it important? Look at some of the data. There's a study by Zach comparing low trust companies with high trust companies. High trust companies just outperform in so many different areas: energy, engagement, stress, less stress, higher productivity. That's one of the amazing things, is that you actually are getting more performance with less stress. It's if you do it right. Gallup for many years has tracked engagement, which is very closely tied to trust. Engagement being to what extent are employees excited about what they do, committed to what they do, and their studies show, again, engaged work units have fewer defects, less absenteeism, and so forth. Gallup actually tracks engagement every month, and they've been tracking it since the year 2000. And the good news is it's been going up, especially over the last 6-7 years. We're now at about 36% of the US workforce feel engaged. And it's nice it's going up, but that says that 2/3 of the workforce is not engaged, meaning they're coming to work, they want a paycheck, and that's pretty much it. So that's the huge opportunity we have to try to get better performance and a better workplace. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Now with the pandemic, this just came out, and thanks to Hank Zarnicki for finding this article. It just came out a few days ago in Sloan Management Review. Very, very well documented study. They looked at resignations. I think there were some 24 million people resigned between April and September of last year. And through looking at their comments and categorizing them, they determined what were the reasons for them resigning. And compensation as a problem turned out to be like number 16 on the list. It was really pretty low. The number one reason for resigning is a toxic corporate culture. It was 10 times more important than compensation to leaving. So to me, that's not surprising, but it's startling. I kind of believe, I felt this is what was happening, and it was really interesting to see the data on it. And I would encourage you to look at that. Here's the link. We can always give you the link afterwards. And then you have the personal, the WIFMs, right? What's in it for me, for management, and I always present these, and it's true. I mean, I've been there. I lived through this, and I've lived through it with other companies that do this. You don't have to worry as much about employees, what they're doing behind your back. I mean, who wants to be chasing your employees all the time? You don't have to come up with all the ideas and all the answers. And there's less pushback. You do get more acceptance, and maybe even embracing your demands. It's not Pollyanna. This actually happens. The WIFM for employees, what's in it for employees, they have more positive relationships with their supervisor, with other team members. Personal challenge of learning. Not everybody's into that, and maybe they're kind of accustomed just to the old way of going to work and doing your thing, but a lot of people do like that. It's amazing how it can really turn somebody who's kind of disengaged into somebody who's engaged. Satisfaction of feeling ownership in the improvements. So important to get, compliance. And then even just eliminating waste is those kind of annoying pebbles in your shoes, and feeling some level of control that I don't have to live with this. I can do something about it as a worker. Now the Gemba walk, as I said, so it's not just saying, well, here's all the good things. How do you do it? Well, the Gemba walk is a super way to do it. And Fujio Cho's great, well-quoted statement, go see, ask why, show respect. That's the way to do it. Manny was mentioning, there's sometimes the Gemba walks are done on a more ad hoc basis, like if there's a problem or something, we're going to go out and see what's going on, and that's okay, but it's not really trust building. Okay, if you want to build trust, you want to have a regular schedule where you're going out, basically showing respect to the worker. That they're important. That's why I'm coming out to see you and see what's going on, even though there's no particular problem, So, and it has to do with, and this is a whole seminar itself, but the traditional command style of management, directing and enforcing, we want compliance and control. It is inherently low trust. It doesn't mean that these executives are bad people. It's just the system. This is what is still to this day kind of accepted or believed to be the system of management, especially in the larger companies. For respect for people to work, you have to move more towards partnering style. And it's a transition. It's not a transformation of we're going to stop all the old ways. Gemba walks can move you in the direction, start guiding and coaching, look more for engagement and learning, and that's where you get the high trust. Manny, you got a thought on that?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One, I loved what you did with the WIFM for managers and employees, the what's in it for me.
Yeah.
And we got a comment actually related to that.
Okay.
So David, I'm glad to see your emphasis on people. What are your thoughts on tapping into an employee's passion and tapping into their creativity? How do you see this fitting in your model?
How fitting? Say that again. I'm sorry.
Sure, no problem. The commenter was talking about your emphasis on people. Good. So what are your thoughts on tapping into employees' passion and tapping into their creativity? How does that fit?
Yeah, great question. One of the big obstacles to creativity among your employees is two things. One is they're afraid to stick their neck out a little bit. They're afraid to say something that is out of the box because they may be viewed as blamed about that or shamed or so forth. And so when you have this kind of general fearful, compliant environment where even though it's not said effectively through the behavior, it is the managers are saying, look, we really didn't hire you to think, especially if you have a manager who's not open-minded and willing to, listen and accept suggestions. We didn't hire you to think, we just did you to, we hired you to do work. And so that's where you get the disengaged employee who's may have some great ideas. And I've seen this over and over in my own business as well as the companies I work with. Employees can have incredible ideas, but if they don't feel comfortable in going outside the box a little bit, and if they don't feel they're listened to, you're probably not going to hear that idea. So yes, absolutely, it absolutely supports that. You're going to get a lot more innovation and creativity. I always quote the how many employee suggestions come out of Toyota, which of course is, we all know Toyota, that I think that there have been studies done that on average, employees in a company will make maybe a 0.5 to 1 suggestion per year per employee. And Toyota in Kentucky, not too long ago, was averaging about 93 suggestions per employee per year, which is just astounding. So, that shows you the kind of creativity. And it doesn't mean all those were great suggestions. I mean, you do have to be able to respond to this. So this is something you have to work your way into. And it's all about learning, and even a suggestion that doesn't fly, you at least respect it and talk about it and show, well, maybe this would work, but no, this doesn't work. How could we make this work? So.
Okay, I have another question for you, if you're interested.
Go.
So someone asked, with more companies going fully virtual, what are your ideas or thoughts on Gemba walks in a virtual environment? Does it work? How would you do it?
Yeah, it's not as good, but if you think about it, when you do a Zoom call, and if somebody has a camera that they can move around their workplace, you can do a lot of that. You can. I mean, right now, I could be Gemba walking with you, Manny, and I can say, hey, look, let me see those. Oh, I see those books on the shelf. Yeah, what have you been reading lately, or what? Oh, I like what's on that board there. Tell me about it. So I don't see that as the key thing is not to make it okay, just I'm the one supervisor and I go Gemba walk with 10 people on a Zoom call. Then you're missing that kind of personal connection. And so I realized that could be, then it gets logistically difficult if you have a lot of employees. But I've seen that done, and I don't see that as you definitely want to try it and use what are now pretty darn good ways of communicating, using Zoom and other kinds of conferencing like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, I'm just about there. The last piece having to do with the building the culture of trust is this organizational tool, trust assessment tool. Now, I built this a number of years ago based on this book called The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Stephen Covey. This is Stephen Covey's son, who has written some very good material, but this is a super good book, and I would encourage you to get it because it really brings home just how valuable trust is, but especially how damaging and costly a lack of trust is. So in the book, Covey actually defines 7 levels of organizational trust, and what I've done is I've grouped them into 4 dimensions and set it up as a scoring system. So the way I use this is a couple of ways. One is on the front end, if a company is looking to get into lean, we're just starting up, it's kind of a readiness, like I mentioned earlier, where you can have the top management, fill this out, basically assess where you stand each. So working atmosphere, you say, where do we stand in this range? Where do we stand on personal relationships? But of course, the best way is to actually do kind of a 360 style, get everybody to anonymously fill this out. And then you see where you stand here based on scoring it by the level numbers, it describes it. So basically, if you're generally in this range or higher, you're okay. That you've got room to grow in terms of trust, but you're okay. But if you're below, if you're in the low level, like 18 or below, which pretty much is kind of level 4 or 3, maybe a little 5, there's caution, and I say, before you jump too quickly, you may need to start with Gemba walks, just to kind of build some relationships, rebuild some relationships. And of course, if you're in a really bad situation, then you're talking about even more, serious kind of catch up to do. So you can use it on the front end. You can also use it maybe every 6 months or 3 months or a year or whatever to kind of assess your progress, and even if you don't necessarily, fill it all out, you can just kind of do it yourself and see where you stand, do it informally of, are we improving our personal relationships? Is the working atmosphere getting a little better and so forth? Because, it is long term and it's a way to help you assess that. And I'm not going to go through those. So those are the 4 practices. That's the model. What's the potential in frontline service? This is the area I really feel is the future of lean, because as far as lean, the respect for people kinds of lean, because you do in frontline service, whether you have your own company or maybe you're a relatively autonomous business unit in the front line, you do have more control over your culture. If you're running General Electric, you got a heck of a time trying to control the culture of something huge like that. So the smaller mid-sized businesses are in a better position to take on respect for, the respect kinds of lean. You tend to find less experienced managers, and they're more willing to deviate from that classical management and try a new approach. If you're a top manager in a Fortune 500, you're very experienced, you're kind of bought into the classical management, and there's exceptions, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, the small and mid-sized companies have a better shot. You have a better shot at getting management and owners to accept that idea. Small business owners now can take a longer term view without jeopardizing their position. So that's where, a public company, as I said, you may be very much believing in respect for people, but you've got the stock market, all over you, wanting to see short-term action, and that's a problem. So again, private companies, small and mid-sized, they're more able to take that long-term unit position. And I do want to say, even though this is the area I work in myself, small and mid-sized business owners, the business units, this idea of cultural islands, this is something that Edgar Schein has talked about. And if you ever want to get into organizational culture, he's one of the leading, experts on this. And he talks about the notion of a cultural island within a larger company, where if you're reasonably autonomous and you do have top management that's reasonably supportive and open-minded, you have this ability to try this out. So again, the simplified 4-practice system is something you can try to build this, more of the respectful culture and more of the continuous improvement culture, which is really a mindset as well. So I just wanted to wrap up here. To let you know, as I say, I do focus on small and mid-sized business. I have a 4 webinar series going on. There was one I already did in December, and then 3 more coming up in February, March, April. This is through Broward SCORE, and SCORE is really a excellent organization supporting small business. So you can sign up there. But I added the word units because even though my examples in these webinars, I'm directing it towards small business, all the things I'm covering absolutely apply to small business units as well. So if you want to take that kind of cultural island approach and try to make this work in an autonomous business unit, this would be where you get into more of the details of how to do this and more worksheets and so forth. Lastly, on my website, you can find a 2.5-hour executive education course, again, around the 4 practices. This is my book, which goes into more background and detail, and especially if you want to do more Kaizen kinds of events. There's my email, so I'm always happy to help. As I told Manny, I'm not trying to build a consulting business around this, frankly. I just, I've done well in business with Lean. I really enjoy teaching this, a little bit of give back there, but I do believe this is important for us, not only in business but in society, because we certainly need more trust in our world, and to the extent that we can build some trust in the workplace, that can only help. So my hope is that if you're dealing with companies that are already lean, but they're pretty much on the kind of the task-oriented side, that we can start moving them more towards the people side. But there's still probably 80% of the companies don't even know what lean is. So we have a huge opportunity for building it and helping this great system that works really for everybody. So with that, I will turn it back over to Manny, and thank you very much, and we can do whatever we do.
Great. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. We've got time for a couple more questions. What I will say is, if you have any questions, great. If not, we did get a comment. David, thank you for your amazing seminar. Great stuff and enjoyed it. Reminded me of Musketeers. So I don't really have anything beyond what I'm.
All right, that's an inside. In our doctoral program, we had our Musketeers meetings where the doctoral students would get together and just kind of talk about anything. So.
Oh, got it. Okay, so this is a gentleman by the name of Arvin who that. So okay, good. No, I really like what you're doing here, David, because you're just boiling it down to something that's nice. It's clean. It's simple. You don't need to drag people into a conference room to be able to expose them to these concepts, and that kind of fits with where we are in terms of delivering content or information to people when they want it. That says, David, how did you start doing lean in a service industry?
Yeah, good question. Well, I mean, I originally co-owned with my wife, Brenda, a wholesale distribution business back in the 90s, kind of came across total quality management back then. people didn't talk much about lean, but actually, and Paul Akers was, one of my good suppliers, and he was just discovering lean. So I really used lean principles with great success. I didn't have time to go into that, but it really over 10 years we did, tripled sales, we self-funded growth, high top profitability, and so forth. Sold the business to a large German company 10 years later. But then so I started in service there, but then a lot of my experience the last 10 years has been teaching in the MBA program down here at Nova Southeastern University. I developed a course and taught it called Lean Entrepreneurship. So, and it was actually, I did teach some lean startup in there, but it was mainly about lean management. And I felt from my experiences with my company, Trend, it's called Trend Distributors, that this is great stuff. I'm trying to teach people who have started businesses or trying to start business, how do you build a business? And I couldn't think of a better structure for it. So, and it turns out, the great majority of our students here in Florida are in the service industry. I mean, I'll get some manufacturing, but so I didn't come into this as a lean consultant. I mean, I came in really I was a full-time professor in decision sciences at Nova, but I just really loved lean. I developed analytics and service ops management and systems and all that stuff. But so anyway, that's why.
Okay, got it. So a couple of comments here. One, there's a common theme here. Thank you, David. Great presentation. Here's another one. Thank you for the presentation. You gave me a great idea for our work instruction that I'm working on. Oh. And someone else said, I do like the simple approach. They plan to apply some of these concepts. Thanks for the presentation. So
that's awesome. And please email me. I'm happy to share it. This is all free stuff. I've got a lot of stuff on my website, essenceoflean.com. But yeah, don't be afraid to contact me. And like I say, I told Manny I'm trying to get now more involved with ASQ and kind of collaborating on especially small and mid-sized business and this whole idea of a more simple approach to lean. So love to hear from you and happy to help any way I can.
Okay, I'll tell you what, folks, we went a little over today, but we knew we would. David had an awful lot of content and just a lot of things to share. Seems like you guys didn't mind too much, but you do have the afternoon or evening or whatever period of day you are, depending on where you are. We got a couple more thank yous. I will say a couple of things. One is that if you're looking for David to present, I'm sure if you ask him nicely, he'd be more than happy to do so for your section or your organization. Second thing is I can tell you if you connect with him on LinkedIn, he's one of those people that's a pleasure because he'll actually respond to you. It really works out well. I mean, David, honestly, I want to say thank you. I obviously see and meet a lot of people, a lot of presenters. I have to tell you, I feel like you've sent me a message in a way that few people have over the last year or so. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let's see. So a couple other things just before we finish up. I want to say with ASQ, there's several different ways to engage with us, and that's really what the occasional series is all about. One of them is you can engage on My ASQ with LED. You can engage with us on LinkedIn. If you want to, you want to come to Phoenix at the end of February, we're having the LSSC or the Lean Six Sigma Conference. So that's really another place. Or feel free to subscribe to the Lean Enterprise Division on YouTube, and you'll be notified anytime there is a presentation coming up or a presenter coming up, and then you can decide if you want to watch it. Of course, I have to say, since I've been doing the work on YouTube, that one of the things we've done is we've really amped up, I think, the presentations themselves. That's one of the reasons why they take longer. We're putting in some credits and titles and openers and outros. And also, too, the big thing, though, is that each of these presentations is chaptered so that you can easily skip to the topic that you want. So perhaps we'll see some of you either on my ASQ or at the Lean Six Sigma conference. Really looking forward to it. Again, we've got a few more comments, informative, many thanks to David, et cetera, et cetera. So folks, thanks. I know you could spend an awful lot of time doing lots of different things. Really appreciate the fact that you spent the last hour plus with us. Hopefully you have been enriched somewhat from it. And if not, then, keep plugging away until you are, because really, it's just, engage with David, engage with me, engage, it's different points of view I find to be fascinating, and how two different people can have very different approaches, and they can be valid in the right circumstances. So David, thank you very much. Really do appreciate all your effort here. Folks, so you will see things. You will see the RUs. You will see a copy of the slides. You will see David's other handout, the Lean Playbook, as well as we're going to get you out that link as well. It is in questions, but if you didn't get it, then you should expect to see it by tomorrow. Folks, otherwise, have a great evening. Okay, so here's another comment or two. Just got to get them out there. David, I'm a tech startup. So now I'm a lean tech startup. Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really the best thing.
Lean.
Many thanks. Thank you for the excellent presentation. And that really echoes a lot of the things that we've seen. So folks, again, have a great evening. I know for myself, I'm going to go grab some dinner now. Maybe an adult beverage. We'll see. And have a great evening. See you in February for another couple of great presentations, both on the monthly webinar series as well as the occasional series. And really enjoy. Take care, folks. David, if you want to hang on for just a little bit, we'll just wrap up here.
Yep.
Okay. See you all later.
Thank you. Thanks, Manny. Thanks you to all.
It's funny because you showed that picture with Paul Akers, and I was wondering, I was like, that kind of looks like Paul Akers, like an older Paul Akers, because last time I talked to him, he didn't have anything on top.
Yeah, I knew him back
sure first,
as he
but
started his business. Yeah, he's a good guy.
So all very good. So just to be clear, it was what we're sending out is the Lean Playbook, the selected slides, as well as the YouTube link. Is that correct?
Right, and then you got the 2 PDFs were handouts.
So yeah, that's what I gotta see here.
Yeah, I sent those today by email, but you can, or no, I'm sorry, actually yesterday.
Yesterday, okay. So let me take a look here, because did you tag onto the oh, you did. Okay, right. The Bolo chart as well as the trust assessment tool.
Yeah.
I kind of missed something there, and I apologize about that.
No, it didn't have to go before. I mean, it's just after the fact.
Yeah, so you know what I'll do? I'll pass these on and see if we can't get Hank to send them out to everybody. So.
Okay.
Ryan, you there? Ryan came on. He's another one who's helping us with webinars.
Yep, I'm still here, Manny. Hey, David.
Hey.
Gotcha. Yeah, so Ryan's he's kind of learning a little bit of what's going on. I suspect he's probably seen it. I think actually now you're probably at the point where you're ready to take a more active role, Ryan. I don't know if you feel that way yet. I'm certainly not going to push you, but I kind of think that.
Yeah, it definitely seems more complicated and challenging than what I thought. Let me practice a little bit more.
Hey, no worries. Yeah. Well, join us for the practices, or we'll set up a time for ourselves, because that really is the best time to practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
When there's no pressure. It's funny. That's one of the reasons why, I like getting on early, is because I can't stand when people get on 5 minutes before the thing's supposed to start, and they're like, I can't see my screen, and I'm having trouble with this. And I mean, my gosh, if I hadn't gotten on early tonight, I would not have had time to reboot my router the way I did.
Yeah, you got to reboot your router and everything.
So anyway,
good presentation. Thank you, David. I think it's
Thank you.
Lean is powerful. I wish we get more people to adopt it.
Yeah, step at a time. Keep talking, keep presenting.
Especially after pandemic.
So the organizational trust assessment tool. Let's see here. I'm just trying to pull all stuff. I like the Bolo chart. That was kind of cool. Again, just something different that I haven't seen, so that's neat.
Well, I've been a little bit in my own, world. I mean, just trying to teach it. But I mentioned it before, I really would like to get Andrew Koenig from City Furniture more involved in this, because he, it's one thing to be teaching it and learning. I've gone to conferences and read and all that good stuff, but he really, at City Furniture, they really practice this, and retailer. So I'm trying to get him more involved. He's just so busy and running the company, but he's one of those true believers. I find some people that really, it's not just doing this, because they want to be a consultant. They really believe in it, and he's a true believer. So he was very influential in helping me make sense of all this and kind of put it into the form of a management system, that is teachable to MBA students. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think it's neat. Sorry, I'm trying to finish up this email to Hank. So,
yeah.
David, you mentioned
better streaming, they're all pretty new. So, sorry, go ahead. What?
Sorry, I was trying to ask David. Then he mentioned in the slide that value stream mapping is less effective, and the business process mapping and Gantt chart is more effective. Why is that?
Well, because if you try to, for example, handle a decision point and a feedback loop, which of course is common. And I know you have that in manufacturing too, but it's just not reflected well in the chart. So having that format of, across the bottom is the production, and then across the top is the information return, and it's just worked a lot better. I mean, and, basic mapping can be taught. You can teach mapping as more kind of a general, process mapping is nothing specific to value stream mapping, but the basic notion of tasks, activities and logical connections and all that. So, and I do have pretty useful templates. I think I mentioned it, to like those two that you saw on the screen. I worked them up for, getting gas is something everybody can understand, but it took me about a half hour to put those together. So when you have the template, it's a Excel template for the Gantt chart, and it's a PowerPoint template for the flow chart, which I actually got from Samson, who came up with that PCN method. So
great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. But I think you're right. Typically, value stream mapping used less in a business process. It's more start with a business process mapping to see what's going on, and then we move on to the next step. I think you're right.
Another aspect is how, value streams normally, I think, are looked at kind of an enterprise level, right? They're kind of really 10,000-foot views of what goes on, but which is useful. But once you get down to the more micro level and specific activities and you know, that's where you do get more of the feedback and decision points and, you know, a network, and you get the different players too. You know, that's what, like if you're making a product in a factory, it's very controlled. You got that whole sequence of things to produce that product. But in a service environment, like what Samson talks about, is that services are co-produced. That's what makes them different. Meaning it actually co-produced and the customer. You know, you think about it, like when you're, you know, a service in a restaurant. Well, it depends on the customer behaving properly too, right? And waiting,
Yep,
and
exactly.
you know, so it's a whole different. All that together makes it just a lot more useful to teach it that way.
There's more interaction. You're right. There's decision make and go all this loop coming backwards. Can I send you an email so you can share the templates you have, if you don't mind?
Absolutely, sure.
I'll do that.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's see what my templates are.
Sorry, I got my camera broken today. I wouldn't be able to use. I'll show my face next time. Promise.
Okay. And what is your name? You're Brian?
Ryan.
Ryan.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm on the West Coast, in Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
So Ryan, did you just say that you broke your webcam today?
Yeah, it's not functioning, so I had to fix it. But it should be easy. Don't worry.
Hey, seriously, David, thank you. It wouldn't surprise me if you got half a dozen or more hits on LinkedIn already.
Well, I would love it. It'd be great.
That's what I.
Confirm. You'd like to call David
Oh,
alone?
God.
No problem. I won't. Who would you like?
God. I wasn't even talking to her. Sorry. Yeah, no. So, yeah, that's just what generally happens. I mean, I usually get a few after doing one of these. And it's funny because I've been doing this for almost 2 years now. Pretty much, maybe not every month, but you know, on and off, regularly. And I swear that just now people are like, I'm starting to penetrate people's consciousness.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
as a person, as a series, as everything else. So it's just kind of funny, that's all.
It's fun. Yeah, I've noticed that too, that you never know when you're going to actually get somebody to respond and wake up, you know.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I've learned, well, I can't just say it once, I can't just say it twice, I got to say it
Yeah.
half a dozen times, and then I got to repeat myself. So